This is a tutorial on how to use the Better Graph windows in your application. So here's a set of objects on the left-hand side of the screen that show 8 different humidity and temperature sensors with the name and the live value and a small sparkline chart here. And on the right here we see this icon, and the icon here, it means that these are values that we can add to a graph. If I right click on the icon, it'll show me the tag path. So I know exactly what it is that I'm going to be adding to my graph. And then there's a button here for add to graph, and last a button to open the graph. So I don't have anything on my graph, so I'm going to add this to my graph. All these things I can change once it's been added to the graph, so I'm going to do that there where it's a little bit easier to see. The name and description, I can give it whatever I want. If I have a better name than what comes up here, if I have a different name for maybe my truck that I use, then I'm going to put that there. And whenever this window gets opened, it generates a random color. Sometimes the color is good, sometimes it's not. So if I don't like it, you can click on the color picker and select a color. Then I'm just going to add that. I'm going to leave everything as default and explain all these in the configuration window. And I'm going to click on add pen to add it to my graph. If I want to see what's on my graph, I can right click on any of these and click on open current graph. So here's my graph with my data on it. On the bottom is our date and time range. So wherever this is colored in, that's where I know where I have data, and wherever it's not, I don't have any data. So I'm going to look right over here. If I wanted to manually specify a date range, if I wanted to see from the 25th till today, I could type that in and it'll automatically size that out. If I wanted to see it smaller, I can grab the side of this and move it in. If I wanted to adjust this range, I can click the plus here and it'll zoom in, and I can zoom in even further. Up here in the top right of the graph are a few buttons. This will full screen and get rid of my time and date selector. If I want to print to either a physical printer or a software one, I can do that here. So this might be a good place to set up a PDF printer so that you can print your graphs to PDF and save them. Last, you can save your chart data as an Excel file by clicking the save file. In the top right is where we can configure our pens. So now with one pen on the screen, I can double click on this area to change names, and it'll reflect down here. So if I wanted to change this to humidity, I could do that. If I wanted, the description is only going to really show on this page. So if I wanted to give more information about what this pen is, I can do that here. This next part, tag path, isn't editable. Subplot makes sense when we have 2 different pens or more added to a screen. So I'm going to go ahead and add truck 7 temperature on here and click add pen and open the graph again. So now I have these 2 pens, and what subplot does is it breaks these up into smaller subplots. So if I wanted to see truck 7 temperature on a different subplot, I'm going to put him on 2. So you notice that this subplot is much bigger than this guy. So if I click on the subplots button, it's going to show me my subplots. And so by default, subplot 1 has a weight of 5, which means that he's going to have way more weight or area on the screen than the other one. If I wanted to make him a little bit bigger, I could say 3. Or if I want to make him smaller, I can set him back to 1 and make subplot 1 even bigger by giving him more weight. Enable background color will enable whatever background color you specify there. If I needed more subplots, you can add them here. The last part in this chart is the hidden or enable. So if I wanted to hide one of these guys for a minute, I can do that easily. On the right hand side, we have style options for every pen. So if I select a pen, I can change these options for that. Most of these are pretty self-explanatory, but the first one is color, which changes the color of the pen. So if I don't like how he looks, I could make him red here. Style is how he appears. So right now that's a line. If I wanted to see something like a bar, that's what we have there, or maybe an area. It'll color that in. If I select something like line with gaps, I can give it a dash pattern. So this is the number of pixels on and the number of pixels off. And if I hold my cursor over that, it'll explain it. This is how thick the line is. So if I make this less, it'll make it thinner. If I have something selected like line and shape, we'll get rid of the dash. We can see that all these data points have a shape, and so I can change these to different icons, and if I wanted these to be filled in, I could check that box and now they're solid. The aggregation mode, some of these are simple, some of these are complex. Usually min-max or average are best to use. If you want to know more about that, you can click the question mark and see the explanations of them, or you can look in the Ignition help files. The last part of configuring our pens is our axis options. So right now I only have one axis, and that's default axis. Our default axis is going to always auto range the y-axis. So he sees that our data falls between this area, and so he's going to make it that big. If we want to change that option, we can open up our axes window. So the first default axis is never editable because he's the baseline. If we click on the add axis button, and we get a new axis. So we can give this axis whatever we want. So I'm just going to say temperature, and then I'm going to give it a label so it'll show on the left instead of value. It's going to say temperature. It's a numeric. It'll be on the left. You can put it on the right if you want. Change its color. And so I don't want him to be auto ranged. I know this temperature sensor is 0 to 150, and so that's where I want to see it. And then you can change your tick or grid lines. I'm going to leave them as auto, and then I'm going to close it. So now for temperature, I'm going to put him back. Well, no, I'm just going to leave him that way. So now for our temperature, I can select the temperature axis, and now he's ranged from 0 to 150. I'm going to go ahead and change our weight back so we can see that a little bit better. And so that's all the options for configuring our trend screen. The last part that we haven't covered is saving and loading graphs. So from this drop down, I can see what graphs have been saved, and and this is by any user that uses this application. If I really like this graph and want to save it, I can always just click Save Graph and give it a new name. And so I'm going to say track 7 temp plus 8 humidity, and I can give it a description if I want. And I'm going to click Save, and then he'll appear in the list of graphs. So I can click on Open Graph if I want to load it, and it'll load everything that we configured, including our subplots and our axes. If there's other things that I want to look at, I can open those graphs and it'll recall those configurations. If there's a graph I don't need anymore, I can select it in the drop down and then click Delete Graph, and it'll give me a confirmation, are you sure I want to delete this? Last, if I'm working and I want to start on a new graph, I can click this button and say Clear Graph, and it'll delete all the tag pens that I have in here. The only thing to note there is our axes and subplots configuration will persist. So you may need to go in there and edit your axes if you need to, or if you have a graph that you like that you already have your axes set up the way you want to. So I have truck 1, 3, 5, and 7 over here. I can load him, clear the graph to get rid of these pens, and then add whatever pens I want, and I'll still have these axes options available to me. So that's it on using better graphs. If you have any questions, comment below. Thanks.